When you are the first generation born entirely in the 21st century and labeled as a fully digital native, this comes with a series of characteristics that are synonymous to none other than Generation Alpha. Their development in a large way is influenced by screens, and with an early interaction on social media, this means they exhibit certain preferences for apps and platforms. Data demonstrates this very clearly. Up to 43% of them have a tablet before the age of 6, and 58% a smartphone before the age of 10. We are not wrong to worry about how this exposure will impact them, or is there something else in store for them? Hello, everyone. I am Goldie, your host for today.
And my name is Lakshan, your co host. And this is episode 20 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast.
For as long as I can remember, the reputation social media has held with all generations has had one of duality. Words such as addiction, anxiety, and algorithms have governed this dialogue. We have addressed this here on our podcast too. We have also, however, heard things like exposure, impact, and being authentic for the same platforms. It is no mystery that escaping social media is no longer a reality. Gen Alpha is the one cohort that did not have that choice because they were born into it. In part one, we will understand how it has become their second skin. Imagine a young generation Alpha kid named Mia, born into a world where social media is an integral part of everyday life. From the moment Mia came home from the hospital, her parents, both millennials, were already posting her milestones on platforms like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. For Mia, this immediate exposure made social media feel like a natural extension of her own environment. She sees her family sharing moments, and she often enjoys age appropriate content on platforms specifically designed for kids, let's say YouTube. As Mia grows up, she's never known a time without smartphones or tablets. By the time she's able to hold a device, she has access to a variety of interactive apps and games, including YouTube and TikTok, where children her age are becoming influencers and content creators. This digital landscape shapes her interactions and friendships, making social media a common ground for connection, creativity, and expression. With these experiences, Mia embodies the quintessential Gen Alpha child, comfortable in a hyper connected world, juggling screens, exploring her identity, and effortlessly blending her online and offline lives. I'm not saying every Gen Alpha is Mia, but statistics do show that there is a little bit of Mia in varying degrees in every Gen Alpha kid we know. Along with everything we know, what fascinated me the most was discovering the following. Gen Alpha frequent consumption of video content cultivates a strong sense of trust and admiration for content creators and social media influencers. Remarkably, when it comes to product recommendations, nearly half of Gen Alphas express that they trust, yes, you are hearing it right, trust their favorite influencers as much as they do their own family members. Furthermore, this generation is increasingly relying on social media platforms rather than traditional search engines to fulfill their information needs. I am therefore picturing Gen Alpha having a very active online relationship with influencers as much as depositing their trust in them and in the search engines. Lakshan, how is this landing for you? What do you think of Mia?
What you said about there is a little bit of Mia in every Gen Alpha, I won't say child, but every Gen Alpha individual, right? Because one day they're going to watch this podcast, they won't be children anymore. I completely agree with you on that. And I want to touch upon this having a deep trust and admiration for social media influencers and content creators, right? And that kind of a relationship is called a parasocial relationship, where you feel like you have a strong relationship with these content creators and influencers because you know them so well. You know them so well, at least what they want you to know, but they don't actually know you. So you are under in this, one-sided parasocial relationship, where you trust everything that they say and have a deep level of admiration for them and a deep level of respect for the content creation and social media work that people are doing, which of course in one way is lovely, but I think there is a downside to that as well, right? When you trust these people equally, if not more, than your own family members. When it comes to product recommendations, yes, fair enough. When it comes to
Mm.
other key life decisions and all that stuff, not always the best people to look towards. And one more thing about Gen Alpha that I do know is that they are a lot more um, engaged by live streamers, even more than watching videos on TikTok or YouTube. While they do that immensely as well, live streamers somehow seem to be able to capture their attention a lot more. And it's these streamers who have a hold on this demographic. And for lack of a better term, I would say that Gen Alpha are kids who do worship them.
Yeah.
uh, but I also think that some of these creators are doing a good enough job that they are contributing to helping these Gen Alpha individuals be able to detach from devices to an extent, because they also go about doing their live streaming outside of the you know typical gaming room environment. They touch grass so to say. So that's something that came up for me when when you brought up Mia and the quintessential Gen Alpha
Hmm.
experience.
Yeah. And I think a word that sort of envelops this entire conversation thus far for me is balance. With what are we seeking online? Where does that trust finish and end? And how much time are we giving to the real people, the offline, in this case, our parents and friends and family members, to develop those relationships in a more sort of tactile manner? I mean, I could contrast this with when, you and I maybe were growing up. We too had our idols in our respective ways, whether it was a footballer or, in my case, I do very vividly remember some music artists who I worshipped and had their huge posters on my bedroom wall. But that's as far as it went. I did not have engagement or access to their lives, which is kind of the step forward that Gen Alpha have on that feeling, um, which makes it so easily penetrable to their minds and the way their mindset functions based on what they see and what they absorb and how much content they take in. And I think this is where I want to come into part two. So we have spoken obviously in length about how social media and Gen Alpha definitely go hand in hand. They are the cohort that essentially have nothing to hide, actually, because they are so explicit and open with it. So it may seem like the future can be a little hazy for them, which is why I talk about balance and, in this case, boundaries between what is real and not. But now in part two, I want to share a different insight. And I'm going to call this the new narrative. It's very refreshing when I read about it. When Gen Alpha is born in a world saturated, with the latest technology, they don't necessarily embrace the digital landscape like their predecessors, because this shift is occurring and data is demonstrating it. Recent surveys have indicated a trend away from constant online engagement. 2023 global survey revealed that more Gen Alpha kids, about 43%, prefer to meet friends in person on weekends rather than chatting online, which sit at 39%. Additionally, nearly 75% of US Gen Alphas express a desire to disconnect from tech and actually enjoy outdoor activities, highlighting their growing mindfulness about mental health. So, another factor contributes to this. Obviously, these are great data points to look forward to. But the COVID-19 pandemic also did play a key role in this shift. Let's remember that a lot of Gen Alpha were born very young or were toddlers at the time of the pandemic. So they experienced a very heavy screen fatigue, which after being in lockdown for so long, and there was a very prolonged digital interaction for them. So, what has happened is this exposure has actually led them to approach social media with a more skeptical eye, very different to previous generations. Whilst millennials embraced social media for its novelty and Gen Z navigated the creator economy, Gen Alpha shows signs of wanting to unplug. So, a survey has found that 5% of Gen Alpha consider social media the most important aspect of their lives, but a sizable portion, 25% of its oldest members, who are now maybe 13 or 14 this year, feels it would be very easy to give up. So, so therefore, it's not that social media influences are going anywhere just yet, but Gen Alpha's cautious stance might pave the way for new platforms, forms of engagement that resonate better with their values. And we spoke about values in the Gen Alpha and who they are, right? The episode. I'm excited to see how their preferences will evolve, in the future. However, the truth is, many are still toddlers, and all we can predict is what data tells us. Are you feeling hopeful about this new Gen Unplugged, Lakshan?
I am. I actually am very much so, because I think in one of the older, more recent episodes, I spoke about the experience that I had with my own cousins who happened to be both Gen Alpha, and while they were very much, playing around with the phone, whenever they had to drop it and get back into the real world, so to say, they were able to do that very seamlessly. There was uh, no withdrawal of any kind.
Yeah.
And what you brought in with respect to how the pandemic has played a very vital role in contributing to screen fatigue, I think that is one of the bigger factors, because you and me as coaches, we know that the way that beliefs are formed is that between the ages of 0 and 7 is when you end up accumulating most of the beliefs that you will hold for the rest of your life. And within that time, if they had experienced the COVID-19 pandemic and screen fatigue to a point, I think it's probably in them already to be able to detach from it fairly, without any struggle or discomfort of any kind. So for that particular segment of Gen Alpha, I would say I am very much hopeful. But as you said, like the more recent Gen Alpha will only know what the situation is like when the data comes away in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to pick on two things that you've mentioned, because that's going to neatly take us into part three. You spoke about creating your beliefs from 0 to 7, which is very true. Now, this can be a very strong factor in the growing years, in the early years of the growth of the child. And obviously, this is dependent on what you are exposed to, where your environment takes you. So, if they are going to be finding that balance between online and offline, that's brilliant. However, there is a small, I would say, little mini red flag which I am identifying. The world after social media, as we know, is generative AI, which we've also extensively spoken about. Now, this is actually a very different universe, almost, isn't it? I mean, they're calling it the metaverse and whatnot. And it's almost like another world that we can enter into, which can be quite daunting, but also very impactful on the way you think and the way you uh, respond to generative AI in multiple forms. So, whilst we may feel that Gen Alpha obviously could be setting new dialogues with the social media algorithms, I want to talk about what is going on with the AI discussion on the same. And this is how I come to part three of the episode: Alpha and their role with generative AI. A few episodes ago, specifically in 12, we had discussed in depth about how Gen Z are in fact Gen AI. Now, when Alpha grows up, they may well become, as we could say, the gatekeepers of AI's influence on society. It's just the following the natural course of path of age, isn't it? Right now, we see Generation Z grappling, I think, with the implications of AI driven innovations, everything from AI generated influences to more troubling applications like deepfake technology. As these sophisticated AI tools become more prevalent, Gen Alpha might respond by pushing back against digital overwhelm, seeking a healthier balance between, their online lives and real world experiences. Brilliant, that would be fantastic. But here's the kicker. Brands and corporations will face a significant challenge in conveying trust and authenticity as today's kids start to gain, firstly, spending power. Yeah. And then their attitudes towards social media and content will also evolve accordingly. And so this raises an intriguing question. Are their preferences a lasting reaction to the excess of the pandemic as we think now, or is it just a shift we'll see continue? Regardless, it's clear that the future of consumer engagement strategies will require a completely new playbook. We know this. One that aligns with, as we said, the values of Gen Alpha. And it won't look like anything we've ever seen before. We don't have enough information to predict anything. That's my point here. But what we do have is real data of what is happening right now. And I'm going to take now the opportunity to share something with our listeners. I'm just warning you, it's not a pleasant incident, but it's a very important piece of information that parents especially need to understand and know about. I want to shift the focus from the future, which is what we've been doing all this time, to a very pressing issue that arose as recently as October 2024. A noteworthy platform gaining traction among users is called Character AI. Some of you might be familiar with it. What it allows is for individuals to create and interact with artificial intelligence characters. One of the platform's standout features is its ability to facilitate realistic conversational interactions. Take that in, guys. Realistic conversational interactions. So they are not real, they are realistic. Users can engage with AI characters on a variety of topics, including sensitive issues such as mental health and dating. The capability it poses has a lot of potential risks because young teenagers often experience emotional highs and lows for the first time, particularly during significant events like their first relationships. But what happens when that relationship is with a chatbot? I urge you to research the case of Suel Setzer III, a 14-year-old from Orlando, Florida. Tragically, he is no longer with us because he fell in love with an AI chatbot, which ultimately led him to take his own life. You can find links to the news articles in our show notes. We will put them there, guys. It's a heavy thing, I know. Lakshan, I want to ask you now, what responsibility do you think we older cohorts have towards guiding these young alphas, given what I've just shared?
I think we have plenty of responsibility. While we are the kind of people who believe in the idea of no matter whose fault something is, it is our responsibility to deal with that if it's impacting us. When you are
Mm.
not a fully developed adult, that's a very different story. In that context, it is the people who are older, it is the adults, the older cohorts who have the responsibility of guiding these younger folk of any generation. In our case, right now, it happens to be Gen Alpha. I think we play a massive role, and I think that's one of the things that this podcast and this episode in general, in specific, sorry, is meant to focus on, which is to bring awareness to
Yeah.
those millennial parents who who are the parents of Gen Alpha, to help them understand and see is what the landscape is like currently. You hear stories of AI girlfriends and all that stuff. It's
Yeah.
coming out more and more and more. And
Mm,
unfortunately, the story that you mentioned right now seems to be a case like that. And unless we take an active effort to educate ourselves in this matter first and foremost,
yeah.
and then go about helping Gen Alpha educate educating them as well. Unless we go about doing that, um, I would not be surprised if we continue to come across stories like these more often.
Mm,
It really is tragic. I think it's the perfect word to use. But unless we take the initiative to learn about these things and not shy away, we spoke about the fears that AI seems to strike in the hearts of pretty much every generation apart from Gen Z, right?
yeah.
We can't use that as an excuse to you can't hide behind that excuse and allow the current generation of alpha to uh, bear the consequences of our ignorance. And
Yeah.
only recently did I even realize how realistic these conversations with these AI chatbots can be. I was experimenting with ChatGPT a few weeks back, and I was blown away by how I was very grateful that I live in a world where I can be having a conversation with a computer, which is so realistic. But then I can also see how it can be disastrous.
Mm,
And I think one of the other potential issues we had addressed in a previous episode when it came to Gen Alpha is the challenges that they will be facing with connection. Connectedness is high in their generation. Connection, I think, is where the struggle is going to be, and I think it's up to us to know this and to set an example for our kids to follow, because they're looking
yeah.
at us, whether we know
Yeah.
it or whether we like it or not.
Exactly. I think leading by example pretty much sums up what you're saying, and I couldn't agree more. Uh, I would like to now come to wrapping up. It's been an interesting episode. We've discussed the fantasies of what generative AI imply on all the cohorts, but more specifically today on Gen Alpha. And then we took a turn into me sharing an example where things can go very, very badly wrong. So we have explored how Gen Alpha definitely is at a unique crossroad, in their relationship with technology and social media. While they do demonstrate a strong connection to, content creators and digital platforms, recent trends indicate a growing desire to also unplug and prioritize real world interactions. This cautious approach, influenced by their experiences during the pandemic, obviously sets them apart from previous generations that may pave the way for new norms of engagement and that will align with their values, especially regarding privacy and authenticity. So many questions that we don't entirely have answers for, yet it's just a matter of time. But let's reflect on the very obvious characteristic that I've touched upon that sets Alpha, apart from the rest. They are the most youngest generation. They are still kids, guys, some of them barely teenagers. And this is where I end my episode, asking all the adults that are listening to really understand the impact that AI can have on the brains of such young people, as Lakshan pointed out. Ultimately, the questions surrounding Gen Alpha's future, with technology and AI remain open. But one thing is certain: that evolution will necessitate a fresh perspective on whether it's consumer engagement or their role in digital media in our lives. When we come together with generational wisdom, which is what we stand for here, we can help younger cohorts to make different decisions that can sometimes prevent fatalities like the one of young boy Suel. And that is how we truly mind the Gen Gap. I want to sincerely request parents and other adults to share this episode in their communities. Today is not about the likes or the subscribers, guys. It's about spreading awareness on this hard topic. And we need your help to spread the word. And I want to thank you all that do. With that, we do come to the end of episode 20 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast. I've been your host, Goldie.
And I've been your co-host, Lakshan. Thank you for tuning in all the way to the very end. This was a very relevant topic, and I'm happy that you guys did that.
Muchas gracias.
See you in the next one.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.